Nick and Laura are coming back for the birth of their child at home, so you need to leave, Antonio said loudly. Leave? Me? When I asked back, Antonio nodded with a smile. I've always thought things would be better without you. I hate people who always throw around the right arguments like you do. There are other women besides you. Just because we've been together for so long doesn't mean we have to stay together in the future. Antonio was the one who made a bold statement. Whatever difficulties he faces from now on are none of my concern. He probably thinks he'll forget about it after a good night's sleep, but not this time. He should take responsibility for his own words. I'm Scarlett, 55 years old. Right now, I live with my husband, Antonio. Antonio is 60, 5 years my senior. So, he recently retired. Antonio said, maybe I'll spend my time enjoying my fishing hobby now. He seemed happy about it. Meanwhile, I run a small apparel company, thankfully making a decent profit. Currently, we can afford to live in a high-rent condominium, thanks to my job. Antonio was supportive, but after his retirement, he changed. First, his daily routine shifted. Now, always at home, Antonio had many days without plans. This led to a more lax lifestyle. Staying up late, watching TV, or sleeping past noon. Occasionally, that's okay, but when it goes on for days, it's concerning. I suggested, shouldn't you keep a regular schedule, especially at your age? But Antonio seemed unconcerned. Instead, I've worked hard all my life. Let me be. Don't tell me what to do, he retorted. Another issue was Antonio's boredom. He had a few friends and his only hobby was fishing alone. He seemed increasingly idle after retiring, and he began nitpicking at my housekeeping. Frankly, I'm not great at domestic chores. Busy with work, I rely heavily on the latest home appliances. A cleaning robot for housekeeping, electric cookers for meals. Antonio didn't like that. Robots can't clean every nook and cranny. Doing it by hand is more thorough. He insisted on me doing things manually. One evening, he complained about dinner. Stews need time and attention, not an electric cooker. Even though he never minded before, now he was imposing his preferences. At worst, stop being lazy! You're so sloppy, he would say. I'd consider his requests if I had the time, but I'm too busy with work. If he's retired and has time, he should do it. When I pointed this out, just because you work doesn't mean you can act superior. He snapped. I couldn't help but understand why some people divorce later in life. Yet I endured, considering how hard we had worked together. But things escalated due to a particular event. Our son's wife's pregnancy. Our only son, Nick. His wife, Laura, announced her pregnancy. Actually, Nick isn't my biological son. He's Antonio's, from a previous marriage. We remarried when Nick was 10. Antonio was ecstatic about the pregnancy announcement. Our first grandchild! Our first grandchild! Yes, it's exciting. I replied, happy too. But Antonio's joy was beyond normal. I think he was experiencing grandparent fever. That's why things turned out this way. Laura, raised by a single mother, I'd like to go back there to give birth, probably because he said so. Laura grew up in a single-parent household, so this time, my mom is too busy with work, she explained. So Antonio, eager as ever, said, we need to welcome the baby in the best possible way. And he began preparations. That's fine, but he strangely imposed it all on me. This crib, every kind of milk, just in case. Oh, and a lot of diapers. He just barked orders. I was already swamped with work and chores. Even when I made time to prepare, it was never right. No, not like that, he'd complain. No, you're saying it's not this. Please, enough. I understand you're excited, but do it yourself. Stop relying on me for everything. He seemed shocked to be challenged, standing frozen. Our first grandchild, and you act so detached. Right. You're not biologically related to Nick, so you don't care about him. That's not true. Don't say such awful things. You're overdoing it. If Laura knew how much you're doing, she might not want to come here. This place doesn't feel relaxing. Antonio tried to respond, but couldn't find the right words. Frustrated, he clenched his teeth and retreated to his room. Damn it. I didn't mean to go that far. His fanaticism had driven me to stubbornness, and being spoken to like that about Nick hurt me too. I want Nick and Laura to relax here. That's why I had to stop Antonio's excesses. Later, I thought about making amends, but Antonio didn't come out of his room. Reluctantly, I looked through the door. I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm going, I said, and went to work. That day, I faced numerous work troubles and got home quite late. Dinner was going to be delayed. What should I make? As I thought this on my way home, I found Antonio already sitting at the dining table, waiting. I'm home! Sorry, I'm late. I'll make dinner as quickly as I can. There was no reply from Antonio. I moved around busily. Antonio just sat there, staring as if pressuring me. If he's home anyway, he could have made dinner. Or at least, he didn't need to rush me like this. Finally, I managed to make crispy fish sandwiches and serve them. Sorry for the wait. Let's eat. Antonio immediately started eating his sandwich in silence. Were you that hungry? I sat down and began eating my sandwich. Before I was even halfway through, Antonio had finished eating. He sat up straight and looked at me. What? I asked. Antonio spoke in a low voice. You're all about work, neglecting the housework. What? His unexpected words nearly made me drop my sandwich. What are you talking about? I'm not neglecting anything. Don't act like it's nothing. Like today, just sandwiches? No salad or soup? That's unacceptable. True, I usually serve salad and soup, but today wasn't about being lazy. I hurried because Antonio seemed so eager to eat. I explained, but Antonio wasn't convinced. It's not just that. You always negate everything I say or do. You must think you're better because you're working and I'm retired. That's not how I think at all. Despite my repeated denials, Antonio remained unconvinced. I was getting tired of this pointless argument. Let's stop this. We'll be welcoming Nick and his wife soon. I don't want to greet them with this unpleasant atmosphere. At this, Antonio sneered sarcastically. All right, I've been thinking the same. So, I've found a good solution. A good solution? Puzzled, I tilted my head. Antonio declared loudly, Nick and Laura are coming back for the birth, so you should leave. What? I couldn't believe he was serious. Leave? Me? When I asked again, Antonio nodded with a smile. If you weren't here, things would go smoothly. I've always thought so. I hate people like you who always argue with logic. There are plenty of other women. I was shocked. After decades of marriage, to hear such words? Antonio, carried away, continued to vent his grievances. You lack respect for me, your husband. Always complaining, never just listening. Complaining? I respect your requests as much as I can. It's you who makes unreasonable demands. Shut up. I hate your bossy tone. Just leave. I don't even want to see your face. Antonio slammed the table. It was futile to say more. I said, understood, and returned to my room. The next morning, I called a moving company immediately. After being treated like that, I wasn't going to stay. Fortunately, it wasn't moving season, and I easily scheduled an estimate. I hoped to finish everything while Antonio was out, but he was almost always home. I was worried, but then it seemed like fate intervened. I'm going out tomorrow for a bit. Antonio is the type to forget things overnight, so he spoke to me quite normally. Apparently, Antonio was invited by his fishing buddies and was going for an overnight fishing trip. This was my chance. There was a slightly awkward atmosphere. Maybe even Antonio felt that what he said yesterday was too much. Still, there was no apology from him. He might be hoping to act as if yesterday's words never happened. He's always been like that. Until now, I've been the bigger person, letting things go. But I couldn't just ignore what he said this time. The moving estimate came quickly. I planned to take all the furniture and appliances, but there was less than I thought. The problem was finding a place to move to, but that was easily solved. Someone I knew through work offered to lend me a place. A brand new one, no less. Are you sure? I asked again, and they said, Scarlett, you've been so helpful. So I accepted the offer. I immediately went to see the property. It was more than sufficient, with no issues. I moved everything out while Antonio was away. His harsh words left me without regrets. Perhaps deep down, I had grown tired of life with Antonio. The night after I moved, Antonio called. Here it comes, I thought, and answered the phone. Hello? Hey, Scarlett! What's going on? Antonio sounded panicked, even over the phone. I almost laughed, but responded calmly. What do you mean? My house! It's empty! What's happening? Well, you told me to leave, so I did just that. I had taken everything, from the latest appliances to my favorite dining table. But I only told you to leave! It's crazy to take everything from someone's house! What? Leaving them would be crazy. I bought all that with my own money. You never contributed, saying you didn't need them. Antonio fell silent, then said grudgingly, Fine. Nick and his family are coming tomorrow. Furniture doesn't matter. He'd be surprised to see the place now. Good. Then it's perfect timing. Say hi to Nick for me. There was no point in further conversation. I quickly ended the call. There was another significant matter, but I didn't mention it since Antonio seemed unaware. The next day, Nick called. We'll be there soon. A phone call. Didn't Antonio tell you? I moved out. Really? Nick sounded surprised, but didn't press further. In fact, I sensed more relief than shock in his voice. Cool. Mom's not there. We can do whatever we want then. You're not coming back, right? That's right. I always sensed Nick found me bothersome. He seemed displeased I didn't pamper him like a biological mother might. You're not as kind as other women, he once said as a child. I thought I was raising him with love, so he wouldn't struggle later in life. Well, it's easier for both of us. Laura was uncomfortable too, so see you. That was like his father, always adding one extra, unnecessary comment. I pondered this after hanging up. That day, I was a bit on edge, unable to focus on work. I half expected a call about the furniture and appliances. Laura once said, It must be nice to have all these appliances for an easy life. I secretly thought their visit was to take advantage of that. But contrary to my expectations, no call came that day. Finally, at the end of the month, Antonio called. Scarlett? His voice lacked confidence, making his intention clear. But I played ignorant. Yes? It's about the rent. Yes? What about it? He struggled to say it, but he wanted to talk about rent. Antonio and I used to pay $1,700 for the condo rent. I was the one who paid it all. There's no way Antonio, with his retirement, could afford it. He might manage for a while with his retirement fund, but it would eventually run out. He called me, but hesitated to speak his mind. I had to prompt him. What? You're not expecting me to pay the rent for a condo I don't even live in, are you? No, that's not. You were the one who insisted I leave, right? And now you're coming back to me? That's not something Antonio's pride would allow. As expected, he changed the subject. Scarlett, are you doing okay? With a place to live? Yes, I managed to find a place, thanks to some connections. I'm living comfortably. Saying this left no room for him to ask me to return. I had no intention of going back. But, just in case... Oh, okay. Nick and Laura were saying they miss you. I thought maybe you'd consider coming back. Such words were unusual for Antonio. He must be really desperate. But I had no intention of returning. Oh, really? I thought they disliked me. No, that's not. Well, it doesn't matter. I have something important to discuss, so I'll come over. Yes. Yes, there was a vital matter to discuss for my future. Antonio replied, All right, I'll be waiting. Cheerfully. Later, I visited the condo for the first time in a while. Long time no see. Antonio was dressed up, unnecessarily. No matter how much he dressed up, it was pointless. I walked down the hall and into the living room, where Nick and Laura were sitting. Clearly, they couldn't live with nothing. New sofas, tables, and a fridge were installed. Nick waved casually, and Laura, though glaring, greeted me. The atmosphere was tense. I wanted to finish what I came for and leave. I sat down as Antonio urged. So what did you want to talk about? Grateful he brought it up, I started the conversation. I thought it's better to handle this sort of thing sooner rather than later. Antonio turned pale the moment he saw what I held out. You're planning to divorce me? He was visibly shaking, looking at the filled-out divorce papers. Yes. Ever since you told me to leave, I've been intending to. Did you really say that without thinking? Antonio fell silent. He probably did. He tends to blurt out things in the heat of the moment without thinking ahead. This habit had caused him troubles at work several times. The last time you said all those terrible things, I don't want to see your face, there are other women, and what else? Anyway, at that moment, I couldn't see a future with you anymore. He must remember saying those things. Antonio kept his head down, sweating. Yeah, I said it, but that was not really what I meant. You can say such things even if they're not in your heart? I'm appalled. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I was shocked. I can't do this anymore. That's all. Facing Antonio, our eyes met. He immediately flinched and looked away. Can't you reconsider? We've come so far together. I've come this far only to be told such things. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with you. As I firmly stated, Antonio let out a long sigh. The room was enveloped in a painfully awkward silence. The silence was broken, surprisingly, by Laura. Excuse me, I'm the one who's been most inconvenienced here. I turned to Laura, tilting my head, and she glared at me with eyes full of resentment. What do you mean? I thought this place would be perfect with Scarlett around, clean and full of the latest appliances. I came here expecting to be pampered, but instead I'm caught up in this marital mess. It's a huge nuisance. Laura sighed even louder than Antonio had earlier. She was angry with me for not meeting her expectations of a princess-like pampering. That is a huge misunderstanding. If she's unhappy, she could go back to her own home or anywhere else. But she chose to stay here. When I said this, Laura's face turned red. What's with that attitude? I came all the way here for you. I never asked you to come. Laura looked like she was about to scream. Her breathing was heavy with anger. But it's absurd! I had such high hopes after talking to Antonio, and now this? It's too much. Laura finally burst into tears. Nick tried to comfort her. But this made a little sense. This explained Antonio's excessive grandparent fever. It was driven by Laura's expectations. Antonio, flattered and relied upon, must have gotten carried away. But it doesn't change anything. Laura was inconsolable, and Antonio remained frozen, sweating. There was no point in staying. There's no use staying here. I'll leave. We can settle the divorce through lawyers. As I stood up, this time, Nick shouted, You're running away? Shaking off your responsibilities and causing trouble. I was stunned by the absurdity. It's also good to have a grudge. Approaching Nick, who was sitting close to Laura, I found myself naturally looking down at him. What's wrong? How old do you think you are now? Huh? I'm 35 years old. I took a deep breath and glared at him. So what responsibility do you think I have? Taking care of a 35-year-old son and his wife? Or a 60-year-old husband? Nick was speechless, eyes wide. I couldn't hold back any longer. You're all adults! Enough is enough! Who's causing trouble? Using my efforts as a stepping stone while expecting me to always smile and comply? Oh, calm down, Mom. Don't act like a child now. I shouted so much I was out of breath. I took a moment to breathe deeply. At least, Nick, I always cared about you, raised you as my own, but maybe I failed to convey that. Uh, Nick started to say something but fell silent. I grabbed my things and quickly left the room. No one followed me. Later, Antonio agreed to the divorce easily. No alimony. He mentioned moving out since he couldn't afford the condo. Antonio had never done housework before. Living alone would be hard for him. The letter passed through the lawyer, written in Antonio's familiar handwriting. Thank you for everything. Simply said. He tried to reconcile, but I firmly refused, and he seemed depressed. Nick and Laura decided to go back to Laura's family home. Laura complained, but Nick persuaded her. After the divorce, Nick called once. I'm sorry for everything. I'll try to be a parent like you, he said shyly. Maybe Nick hadn't hated me as much as I thought. I ended up buying the new house I was renting and still live there. Work is going well. I was tired right after the divorce, but now I feel refreshed. It's nice not having to take care of anyone. I'm not sure how many years I have left to work, but I'll do my best. Enjoying my private life too, and secretly, I still wish for Nick's happiness.